How do a music school, martial arts, permaculture, Chinese medicine, and environmental activism connect to an intentional Zen life of leadership? In today's episode of Jam Sessions with Tina Eliana, Dr. Tanya E.E.E. Schmid invites us into her home in Switzerland to learn more about her fascinating life. She shares stories and lessons that challenge us to think differently about what it means to live and lead as a world citizen.
I don't even own a car. I have an electrical bike, and when I go grocery shopping, I have this little trailer, and I ride my bike 20 minutes to down the mountain, load up with groceries, and ride it back up, and I plan it so that I only have to do that once a week. So you can just choose what you value, and then it takes a little bit of effort to stick to it sometimes.
It's time for Jam Sessions with Tina. She's got leadership, insights, and more. Come on in. Leave the titles at the door.
Your story fascinates me. And I want to ask you, starting out, my podcast is about intentional leadership, making that conscious mindset choice and everyday decisions. And man, has that been your life. So I want to ask you, what does intentional living mean to you today? What does that look like when someone says, I am intentionally living my life?
It's a great question. The Taoist and Buddhist philosophy might lead you to believe that they're more passive, right? Because they're just like, oh, you stay in the present moment and you stay aware and so forth. And so it seems like you're just going with the flow. Mm-hmm. But it's actually the opposite, because when you are remaining centered, you can become totally authentic. You let go of thoughts and feelings as they come up, but you just become aware of what's going on in your area. And so it allows you to stay open, but you can still feel then where you need to go. It's like that intent becomes so much more intense. So when I think about some of the choices that I've made in my life, as you said, there's been many different chapters in my life. For example, why did I choose Chinese medicine? I started off interested in medicine, but I wasn't finding what I needed in Western medicine. It didn't use the emotional components of health. And it was not about prevention. It was always about treating things after the fact, when they already hurt and when you were already sick. And when I discovered Chinese medicine, I realized, wow, it incorporates all the emotional factors, and it's about prevention, and it just made much more sense to me. So I chose sort of this offbeat path. This was back in 1995 when acupuncture and stuff like that was still relatively new. Another thing would be the choice to do the Haiti project for music instruments. You may remember that in 2010, there was a huge earthquake back in Haiti. 300,000 people were killed. There were 2 million people left homeless. So there was this race for support from international organizations. NGOs were sending food, clothing, and shelter. But I was listening to a little Italian nun up on stage at one of the fundraisers, and she said, when someone asked her, what do you need most? She said, music instruments. And while everybody else laughed, I kind of heard that, because I was trying to see what is it about the music instruments? And she said, Caritas, the local organization, they feed our children physically, but music feeds their soul. And so it just made so much sense to me that when you're in a traumatic situation, a tragedy, that food might be gone tomorrow. You might have more tragedy come. But if you have music to uplift you, and the Haitians have a very musical culture, right? So I spent the next 4 years collecting over 1,200 musical instruments to send to Haiti. And well, what was nice about it is we did it in a sustainable way, because there were already large containers of medical supplies and food going over there. And we were allowed to stuff these musical instruments in between things. And it started off just for this one school from Caritas. We sent 200 instruments, and all the other schools heard about it. And we ended up sending 1,200 to the 21 different music schools got musical instruments. And what they kept telling me was, when we have instruments, kids come to school because it keeps them off the street, because they're motivated to come to school when everything else is going crazy. And they stay away from crime, they stay out of prostitution. So it became like a really big, important facet because so many people said, wait a minute, food, clothing, shelter, what are you doing with music instruments? And when I explained it, they understood. So that was, again, an intentional choice that was sort of against the go with the flow thing. When I realized one day that the electricity coming out of my socket was dirty energy, when I was living in a region with 14 water-powered electrical plants that produced a dozen times as much energy as the local area needed, and yet because this corporation had taken over and started trading for these carbon certificates online, with this sort of like a stock market thing, we were getting dirty energy without knowing it. So the advertising was they were taking the clean energy from the water-powered region of this mountainous, beautiful area, and they were selling it and making money. And then, wheeling and dealing, we supposedly got electricity from coal-powered electrical plants. And this repower organization was taking the money and they were going to invest it in building 2 new coal-fueled electrical plants. And this was in 2011, I think, when we already knew about climate change. We already knew that we had to get away. We were moving away from fossil fuels. So I had to think to myself, okay, am I going to just sit back, and accept this fact? Part of the Buddhist philosophy, or some of the training that I've had, is this idea of strong back, soft front, clear eyes. And so you have to have the strength, to stay with your authenticity and keep your compassion there, but really see through the greenwashing that they were doing. All their advertisement was about renewable energy. We do renewable energy. And they were hiding these 2 huge projects, which were like 20 times the amount of costs that all the other renewable energies were. When you're living intentionally, if you can stay mindful, you become aware of what's going on around you, you remain with your own authenticity, and maybe you choose the road less traveled in order to make a difference.
My mind is going back to the story about the musical instruments. The Chinese medicine is about proactive. It's not reactive, it's proactive. And what you did was almost Chinese medicine for the soul.
Ah, very well said. Proactive, yes, and at the same time, mindful, aware. If you don't want to be the bull in the china shop, being a leader doesn't mean you just come in and command things, right? You have to stay centered. The whole idea is by balancing. And if they always say that the biggest Zen masters are the ones who notice things when they first get out of balance, and then they can correct them before anything escalates, right? So there's no heroes in a Zen master world.
You definitely can't be on autopilot in a Zen master world. Definitely not. And I love that, the intentionality of living that life. Wouldn't it be amazing if one of the children who got one of those musical instruments hears about the fact that you most likely are the person that got that instrument into their hands and how that impacted their life?
I wasn't flying at that point because I was against flying for climate change since 2010. But that one flight I took in 2012 was to go make sure that the instruments were getting into the right hands. Mm-hmm. And so it was interesting. I was introduced, as the person who had done all these musical instruments, and the kids were all clapping, but it was that sort of that white savior complex problem, And so the thing that I had to learn the most about my time in Haiti was to take a back seat, that not to come in there with my intentions and with my power, because, good leadership isn't about power and ego. It's about caring, like you care for what's happening in that area. And so I decided I have to learn to take a step back and listen to what other people, their knowledge, their intuition, they can tell me what their needs are. And that's how I can then take something, a leadership aspect of that.
That's fantastic. I love that philosophy. I love your heart for people, your heart for our world, our planet. And I would love to know, what was it that compelled you to say, I want to choose this intentional path for my life?
I didn't really like choose a path.
Mhm.
I was just drawn to things. I remember seeing a beautiful picture of a person drawing a Japanese archery bow, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. And sometimes you get these little intuitions, like these little heart aches that come in, and you just say, oh, some people would call it a calling, or something. But I would follow these feelings I would get. And when I met Conjuro Shibata, he was a 20th generation Japanese samurai, the official bowmaker to the Emperor of Japan. And he was teaching half a year in Japan, and half a year he would come over to Boulder, Colorado, because there was this Naropa Institute, et cetera, et cetera. So I studied with him. And what made me want to study things further was the leadership I saw in the teacher, in the instructor. Because he told me, for example, one day that the true message of a samurai is that the job of a samurai is to treat oneself with discipline and others with kindness. I mean, you don't think of a samurai like that, right? But it's self-discipline. That's what the martial arts really do, don't they? We learn discipline so that we can, be strong enough not to fight, right? Because in their mind, in that mindset, the only true opponent is oneself. So you battle your own, inner urgency, your desires or your fears or your anger. And if you can remain centered and release those, you can become fearless. Because if you're living in the present moment, you can't have fear because you only fear the future. You can't have worries because you're only worried about what might happen, right? You're just in the present moment. You're taking it as it comes. And it's the same thing with the past. You aren't regretting, because you can only regret the past. If you're in the present moment, you're doing what should be done at that moment, you can let go of a lot of those emotions that can cloud your field of energy or your desires or your intents. And it makes you a much more authentic person.
That idea of strength being something you don't dominate with, that it's just who you are, that you're a strong
Right.
person. I think if there is somebody listening that says, I'm not strong, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm not strong. You are. Believe in
Yes.
yourself.
That's where the intentional leadership can be turned inwardly.
Mhm.
You don't have to be, oh, I'm going to push all my intent on my surroundings. Intentional leadership can be, what do I want? And I start with me,
Mhm.
and I think the best way to be intentional is to set an example, to try to do things according to your values and your abilities, and just live that example.
That's how we change humanity, one example at a time.
Right. Right.
Yes, absolutely. We've kind of talked about this, but I want to specifically ask you, with what you've shared about Haiti and the plant and how you lived your life, what has that taught you about the stewardship of who we are as humans?
Stewardship, that word is about protecting the environment, or taking care of an organization, or caring for something. And it can involve self-sacrifice. It doesn't mean you ruin yourself, right? Because I always think of, those examples when you're on the airplane, and they say, when they're giving you the instructions, they say, parents, please put on your mask first and then put the mask on the child, right? So you have to take care of yourself first. But once you manage that, if you can get your life together enough that you feel strong enough, that you feel centered, then you can start to extend that stewardship outward. And even with, you can make mistakes. I remember with the Haiti project, I came in with all these ideas. I'd spent 4 years collecting musical instruments, and I had these ideas about how we could go in and distribute them a certain way. And we'd have these certain organizations to teach the instructors, to set up lesson plans and so forth. I was excited. So even though I had a good intent, I came in there a little bit too strong. And I remember one of the first mistakes I made was, we were unloading instruments, and they unloaded a piano that we had sent. I mean, this was a huge thing that we got a piano over there, because schools and pianos are just so great, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
They were excited. They were excited. So I immediately said, okay, this has to go up on the second floor of the school because I'd thought about this because I had read that with the hurricanes increasing, the hurricanes recently because of climate change are hurricane levels 3, 4, even 5. And the last couple of years, the lower floor of the Caritas school was just wiped clean. It was just full of mud and debris and things like that. So I wanted to get that piano safe, right? And you can imagine they had no tools or assistance for moving this piano up to the, so they were just brute strength. And because it was me, the person who brought these instruments, the white savior complex again, they did it for me. They moved it up to the second floor before I could really let them think it, before I allowed it to be thought through. And sure enough, we had to move it again within a week because it was in a place where all the kids could get at it and they were fighting over it and they didn't know how to respect the delicacy of instruments and things like this. They were, pounding it. So it was exciting for them too, but it was like, it just didn't work. And that was my mistake. I should have just waited. I should have had the patience and centered myself, and listen. You have to listen to the knowledge of other people and let the people who know the area, know the situation, absorb what their knowledge is, and then you can make more informed decisions.
That's such a great lesson about leadership is lead with silence sometimes and just listen. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes the answers are right there. Let other people have the opportunity to learn to use their voice. And
absolutely, yeah.
Yes, I love that lesson. I absolutely do.
I think it's also, for example, you can have different ways to be a good steward. With Haiti, I had to really step back. And with the coal-fueled electrical plants, the repower situation, that was a project where I had to step forward. I wasn't in a position where I wanted to play that role, but I felt like that guy in Die Hard, where it's like somebody's got to do it, right? Yeah. It's not like he wanted to do it, but it's like somebody's got to do this, right? And it's not that it's a big deal or anything, but it was just I had to take this front face. I had to be the face for the project, and it was a David and Goliath situation because I was this one, little Chinese medicine practitioner in a tiny little town, and they thought they could squash me like a bug because they were a multi-million-dollar corporation with lots of lawyers and lots of, defensive things in place. And it took an amount of fearlessness. So I used my Zen practice for this idea of fearlessness to do this David and Goliath situation, except that I didn't have a little rock and a slingshot, So what I learned from this part is that people will help you with stewardship. I contacted the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, because that was where I'd originally read that there was some greenwashing going on in our region, that they were basically advertising renewable energy, but then they were secretly building these coal power plants. And they were not building coal-fueled electrical plants in Switzerland, because there was too many heavy metals emitted. They would ruin the waterways from the cooling systems and everything. No, Switzerland wouldn't allow that. So they were going to build one way up in northern Germany where there was already another coal plant up there. They were going to build a coal-fueled electrical plant down in southern Italy in the area of the mafia, the Ndrangheta, I think they call it. I don't remember how they pronounce that, but the mafia down in southern Italy had land that they were willing to be a little bit, cheating a little bit on the rules. And so there was these plans going on that were just ridiculous. And the World Wildlife Fund was able to come in and say, hey, we're going to support you, but don't let us be the face of the project because everybody thinks, oh, here comes, the greenies, the people that are just, and they wanted someone local who could say, we're local individuals, we're a local group. And I got my neighbors together and we just started playing the David role. And so the slingshot was sort of the World Wildlife Fund. They paid for all like when we did a campaign, I think it was over $160,000 they ended up investing so that we could do this 4-year campaign. And then there was this guy who contacted me from Greenpeace out of the blue. A guy calls me up and he says, how would you like to have me as your secret behind the scenes assistant? And he would feed me all the details, all the information between the World Wildlife Fund and Greenpeace. It was like my fearlessness became support. I wasn't fearful because I was supported. You can expand your leadership if you network. if you reach out for other organizations with common interests, common goals. What we ended up doing was after 4 years, we were able to pass new legislation which forbade any public funds to be invested in fossil fuels. And this was huge. This was critical because it was at a time in Switzerland when we had just decided to go no nukes. We still have 4 nuclear power plants, but it's like that we weren't going to build anymore. We were going to try to cut back. We wanted to get away from nukes. And what that meant was we might fall back on coal, we might fall back on gas and coal again. But I was living in the most conservative state or county, canton, it's called, but it's like the state of Switzerland. They have 27 states. And this was the largest one, and it was the most conservative, and they had just voted against fossil fuels. So we were voting against no nukes in Switzerland. We were moving away from fossil fuels. That meant we had to go renewable. So it was a really big decision at the time, and it was worth all that effort.
First of all, I am so impressed with who you are as a human. The idea that you didn't start that with the idea of, I'm going to do this because I get to go work with the WWF. I'm going to do this because I can go work with somebody. You did it because you realized this is not what our environment needs. This is what our country needs. And I'm going to do everything I can to make a difference. And that is leadership.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm one of those people who insists on freedom. And it's like when I found out that it wasn't my choice what was coming out of that saga, I was like, no way, I don't like people I want to live by my own standards. So if you don't like it, change it, right? And so that's what sort of drove that. And when I was talking to people about like my neighbors and stuff, the first thing that always came up with, oh, you can't talk down repower. This is a major provider of jobs in our area, right? And you don't want to, this is, our economy is dependent, our local economy is dependent on this huge organization. But when I started talking about really practical ideas, really simple ideas, I think that's one of the things you need to learn when you're a leader is how to communicate on a very basic level, on a heart level, on a morality level. So we use the basic idea that do unto others as you would have others do unto you. If you are going to build an electrical coal power plant, you darn well build it in your own backyard. So if you aren't going to allow that to be built in Switzerland, then you can't justify building it anywhere else because you're just exporting pollution. I mean, that's just against principles, right? It made sense to people that the Swiss have a really good heart. And most people do. And so it's really about wanting what's best for everyone, not just for us. And so they started to say, yeah, I don't want to be responsible for other people, polluting their environment and having health issues because of the heavy metals. And we really need to get away from fossil fuels. And so slowly the tide shifted.
You had mentioned you had a free gift for our listeners. Could you tell me more about that?
Yes, happy to. This is my little book, my collection of Zen stories. And when you said I could offer something for free, I decided I'm going to offer 20 copies of this for free. So the first 20 people go into my website. It's tanyaswriting.com. That's TANYAS writing.com. You can actually click on newsletter. In the contact form, they have to write jam sessions with Tina Eliana. And then the first 20 people who do that get a free book. And you can see that the Zen stories here, there's 28 Zen stories, and it's wonderfully illustrated by Janina, one of my woofers on my permaculture farm that I had. She did these great illustrations. So it's really it makes a nice gift too. So
yes.
I'll be giving those away so people can enjoy.
Go to tanyaswriting.com. Click on newsletter. Type your first and last name, your email address, jam sessions with Tina Eliana in the message box. Then scroll down and click on I confirm, I agree, I am human, and submit. The deadline is September 8th, and the first 20 people will receive a free copy of Tanya's collection of Zen stories. You better hurry because I know these books are going to go fast. And you mentioned how they make a great gift. They do. For those people that celebrate Christmas and you hang stockings, I can imagine just sticking those into little Christmas stockings, or what a wonderful gift that for teachers or for people that maybe they've made an impact on your life. You could easily mail it to somebody, right? Because it's not super heavy. It's not going to be too bulky. So I love that. I can't wait to read one.
The book is only $12.99, and I've gotten reviews back on it, such lovely reviews. One guy wrote from a hospital bed and said that it just helped him through the whole process of his healing. And so it's a good, it sort of reminds people of Chicken Soup of the Soul kind of a thing. It just sort of, but they're Zen stories. They're about philosophy. And what is different about my book is that I include a lot of personal experiences because I've done this for over 30 years. And so I explain the stories a little bit afterward and use some of my own anecdotes in there. So people compliment that a lot. So I figure, okay, that might be what makes it unique.
For those of you, whether you get it through the first 20 or you purchase it, I would love to hear back from you on how this book impacted you. I'm excited. I can't wait to read it.
That would be nice. That would be really nice.
Go to jamsessionswithtinaeliana.com and in the menu, click on Special Offers, Zen Stories Giveaway, and share your thoughts on Tanya's collection of Zen stories. All submissions received by October 15, 2026 will be entered into a drawing to receive a signed copy of my book, Lessons from Grandpa, releasing on October 6, 2026. Tanya, one of the things that impressed me about your story is you didn't say, I'm going to be this one person. I'm going to have this one role. You didn't look at life as, I want to find a title. You've lived your life as it's come along, right? You've had many roles across the seasons of your life. I would love for you to share more about how that reinvention comes, because that's what it is. It's a constant reinvention and evolving of our lives. How do you do that while still being authentically you?
So life is full of twists and turns, right? Life happens. I just graduated with an anthropology degree from the University of Boulder, Colorado. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know what to write about yet. So I was sort of following my heart there. And I got into grad school and I was about 6 months in and I realized this isn't it. I'm not going to sit around measuring bones and, doing paleontology. I just decided, no, this isn't it. And it took a lot of guts to, when you finally made it into grad school, and I always wanted to be a doctor, or something, have a doctorate degree. I pulled back and said, nope, I'm going to have to take a couple. I ended up taking a couple of years, but I wanted to take a little time to figure out what I wanted to do. Then when I finally found Chinese medicine, I was doing it in a way for years because I've been doing Tai Chi and Qigong and I was reading all the books. I knew a lot about Chinese medicine before I even started studying it. That just clicked for me. So then I was like, wow, this is it. And again, I dove into that role just because it felt like I was fulfilling my path. It felt like my calling was just there. I felt passion and it felt good. But at the peak of my game, financially and organizatorily and all the, where it should have been like the height of my career, I felt tired. I felt like, okay, you know what? I'm feeling a little burnt out. And it was probably because I was doing these other projects as well, right? Because I'm just a passionate person and like having different things going on in my life. But after doing Chinese medicine for about 15 years, it was getting old for some reason. And I don't like to live a life simply because, well, this is the practical thing you do. This is what you've established. This is your financial stability. This is what you have to do. So after the repower stuff, where we were learning all about electricity and all about sustainability, my husband and I thought about it and we decided we have to embody what we've been preaching, practice what you preach, right? And we were not composting. We were not having the time to cook our own meals. We didn't have our own garden. And we thought we have to make some changes. We decided, I guess we're going to have to do it. So at age 50, we decided to quit our successful jobs. My husband was a well-paid electrician. He worked for a larger company that did major fuse boxes in larger centers and so forth. And he was doing really well. I was doing really well, but we decided if it's not where your heart is calling you, so I was able to transition my practice into good hands and sell it. He was able to, train someone in his business, and then we both were able to leave our jobs, and we took our pensions, we took our life pensions, and we bought 7 acres and started a permaculture farm. Permaculture means sustainable agriculture, which means you basically are off the grid. You have your own solar. We had our own well. So we had compost toilets, and we did everything on site. Sometimes we would give away some vegetables, and we'd take in some vegetables or something like that. But basically it was about, can we produce our own food? And it took 6 years, and we were only producing 60% of our own food. I want to make sure that people have open eyes about this. People get all idealistic and think within a couple of years you're supplying all your own food. We worked it hard. We had high beds and hill beds and our own chickens and things like this. It really is difficult because you don't produce the major grains. We couldn't have rice fields. We couldn't have wheat fields. We didn't have the space. We didn't have the energy. 2 people, We had woofers come in, workers on organic farms. So students came in, and they were able to train. They learned about gardening and about, the environment. And some of them went on to become environmental engineers and biologists. And it was so exciting to hear that I still am in touch with many, many of them. And I hear about how we changed their life, and the experience was eye-opening for them, and they went into the same direction for protecting the environment, which is really nice. But basically, we were producing only about 60% of our own food, but we felt like this is authentic living. We finally know how. When you have to provide your own food, you suddenly start to cherish that broccoli that costs only $1.50 at the grocery store, because you realize that we were only able to produce maybe 5 a year or something, because they would get eaten by the slugs, because we didn't use pesticides. We didn't use any, artificial fertilizers. We all did our own composting. We had 3 pot-bellied pigs who were only there for their poop for composting. And they also were there to heat the chicken house in the winter, because we were up in the mountains, and it got really cold, got below 0 in the wintertime. But having the pigs in with the chickens, we didn't have to have any kind of solar energy heating, because the sun was, was very little sun in the wintertime. So the pigs heated the chicken house. So that's sort of a change that was huge for me, and we loved it. But then after 6 years, my husband came down, he discovered he had colon cancer. And this had apparently been going on from even before I met him, when he was 40, because it was a slow process, I guess. And we didn't realize that he was gone within 6 months. So at age 57, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, okay, again, change of plans, life happens. And I wanted a change of pace too, because, if I'd stayed near the farm, I would have been watching what they would do with it. So I sold it to a really wonderful family who is continuing with the permaculture. They're doing great. They're an extended family. They have 3 different families that work this. So it's even better than when my husband and I were doing it. And then I moved down to southern Switzerland so I could learn Italian. I figured that would be a good, get my mind off of the loss, and to start my writing career. And I would never have planned this, right? I thought I was on that permaculture farm for life. And then now I realize, wow, I get to fulfill another dream of mine. So now I'm learning how to become a writer. And here I am doing a podcast. It's like, wait a minute, I'm a writer. I like to just disappear into the mountains and write my stories. And now it's like, no, today's world requires marketing. It requires showing yourself and connecting. And I realized suddenly it's not about brand marketing. It's about reaching out, like you talk about in your podcasts. We are hopefully influencing someone, hopefully assisting someone on their path. And that was very fulfilling for me. So I was excited to do this podcast today.
Speaking of reinvention, we're going to go talk about your book for a minute, because in a way you've reinvented your Zen stories, right? You've done a second edition of them. Am I correct with that?
It's the same book. It's the same book. It just, I updated the introduction so that people could find me more easily. But, I always thought to myself, well, maybe I could do a second book, but it's 30 years of my experiences bottled into this book. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I wrote the book.
Okay.
In the first place. Basically, I was teaching classes, Qigong classes, Tai Chi classes, and Zen archery classes. And how do you get people to capture the meaning of what you're trying to get across? How do you make it memorable? And I always would throw out a Zen story here or there, like, the scorpion and the frog, or the sword master, anything like this that would make an impression to show what I was trying to get at.
Mhm.
And when I went to the permaculture farm, and I was still doing a couple little classes that I just started up again in the new location, but I was really worried that I was going to lose all my stories that I had. And I started, jotting down notes and trying to collect them. And all of the students, whenever I'd left an area, when I left St. Gallen in my practice there, and went to the permaculture farm, and when I was back in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and had a big dojo there, and then I moved back to Switzerland after my first husband passed away, I thought, okay, I make this book for them so that they have my stories still, since I'm not there to tell them. And that made it more valuable to me than just making a book. It's sort of like my Qigong video. When I left Santa Fe, New Mexico back in 1999, 2000, people were so sad, but they understood because my first husband had passed away also. And so I thought, okay, I'll make a video for them of my best Qigong exercises. This is my medical Qigong. And people can find that for free, by the way, on my website. So
Awesome.
if you go to tanyaswriting.com, you'll find videos, and you can find the Qigong. There's a fan video, there's a Qigong video, and you can just go along for an hour. You can do these healing exercises. And to me, leaving things behind, sharing those things with people, I'm trying to make the world a little easier. We're dealing with life and hardships all the time. And sometimes you just need something to cheer you up a little bit and to remind you of your center, help you find it again. And other times it's about doing some exercises and breathing and recuperating from injury or disease. And so that's why I'm trying to put these things together for people.
I have an interesting question.
Yes.
I was raised in a very ultra conservative Christian home. My grandfather was a minister. And I know that some of my listeners are Christian philosophy, are Christian people.
Mhm.
For those that say, that sounds nice, but that's Buddhist, that's not God, that's not my religion, how would you address and explain to people about how you're not forsaking your God or forsaking your religion by studying and practicing the Zen philosophy?
Right. I'm actually Lutheran. And I think people confuse religion philosophy quite a bit, because this isn't where we are worshiping a particular god, or we are not doing any kind of religious practices with the Zen Buddhism. It's about an attitude. It's an approach to life, which of course some religion is also, right? But it goes really well hand in hand. And to sort of support that, one of my good friends is a very strong Catholic. I think it's a Jesuit Catholic. I can't remember exactly, but she basically works at Marquette University in Wisconsin, and she promoted my book. She said, this is one of the best examples of crossing philosophies, of combining philosophies, because this goes perfectly with any of our own belief systems. So not just from me, but from someone on the side coming from a religious standpoint, she loved it. She went and she gave it away to everybody she knew, and was really raving about it. So I think that just shows that it's sort of like Aesop's fables. You wouldn't say, oh, that's against our religion or something like that. They're just basic fables. They're basic general human principles. And when you read about it, you go, oh, that makes such sense. It's like those little aha moments, right? And it's nice to see it in, not really cartoonish ways, but in crystallized form, to see these nice little lessons. So of course you have these little old Zen guys doing the story, but it's just to make it make an impression.
I'm also thinking about your book and about kids that start out in different forms of martial art. I'm speculating this is something that parents can give their kids to be able to study along with, as they are studying some type of martial art, that these are stories that they can read. Am I correct in that?
You certainly are. It's not even just the martial arts, but even things like yoga or other mindfulness practices. they're all sort of feeding into this same wonderful, I guess you could call it attitude or spirituality if it's not sounding too strong, but just this idea of heart-centered compassion, being aware of your emotions and trying to be ethical, moral, and balanced in how we deal with life, how we deal with others.
I have heard throughout our conversation, there is this everything that you do has been about, even if it's not been in the motivation, but there is this consistency of what you do is not for you, it's for others. What you're doing is trying your best to impact other people's lives, even setting up systems that impact lives that haven't even been created yet. So I want to ask you, how do you turn your values for our listeners? How can they turn their values into daily choices?
When I was in high school, I went to a guidance counselor once and was asking what I should do about a certain situation because I was trying to help somebody and things were not working out the way I'd expected and so forth. And he said, why are you trying to help everybody? Why are you doing? And I said, well, because it makes me feel good. I mean, all these things I do are totally self-centered because it's like, I just feel good when I'm in my space, when I'm in my center, and when I feel like I'm acting from a place of authenticity. It makes me feel empowered. It makes me feel happy, at peace. So that's how I sort of look at my values. If it's not a win-win, I'm not going to feel happy. I don't think most people really do. That sometimes we get led into habits which lead us into power plays and so forth. But for me, my basic values take me back to, well, I had a wonderful mother. And my mother taught me, for example, macrocosm, microcosm. If you want to change the world, they always say think globally, act locally. Well, she says if you want to change something out in the world, you change yourself first, right? If you want to influence the macrocosm, you change the microcosm. And so if you want world peace, you have to start being more peaceful yourself in your everyday life. And that I figured as I grew older, I started discovering what are my values. I love to protect the environment. I love world leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa and people who are bringing these wonderful compassion and yet strength into the world. And so we can choose to embody those even if our circumstances are a little bit different, right? I mean, I lost my permaculture farm, right? I had to give that up because when my husband passed away, I couldn't run it myself, but I'm still vegan. I found a place. It took me 4 years to find a place where I could have my own little garden, but now for 3 years now I've had my own little garden down here. I supply all my own vegetables for 6 months of the year. And in the apartment I rent, unfortunately, I couldn't find anything that didn't have fossil fuels, so it's oil fueled. So what I do is I figure I get some points for not having air conditioning, right? It's because we save on the footprint. But I also, in the wintertime, I don't turn the heat up. I basically turn it to the very minimal, and then I wear a hat and I wear long underwear in the house, and I'm just fine. I'm comfortable, but I don't have to heat things that I'm running around in my shorts. I don't even own a car. I have an electrical bike, and when I go grocery shopping, I have this little trailer, and I ride my bike 20 minutes to down the mountain, load up with groceries, and ride it back up, and I plan it so that I only have to do that once a week. So you can just choose what you value, and then it takes a little bit of effort to stick to it sometimes. And you have to be gentle with yourself. You can't have too high expectations. And if you decide, okay, today I'm going to ask my neighbor to drive me because she's probably going to be going shopping anyway, that's okay. You have to remain flexible. But the daily choices do make who you are. And I really believe in living by example. And I constantly remind myself whenever I think, oh, the world has to change, I think, okay, if I do everything right, then I should set an example where if everybody lived like I did, there would be enough food, there would be enough clothing, there would be enough shelter. If they were kind enough, that there wouldn't, if I'm kind with my neighbor, then I'm saying that there won't be wars in other countries, right? If I'm forgiving with people, the person whose dog is always barking, or the person who parks their car in the wrong place, I have to be forgiving. And when I do that, then I'm valuing choices that small actions can make really big changes in lives. One of my favorite quotes from Mother Teresa, and I probably am misquoting it, but it's not that we do great things in life that matters. It's that we do small things with great love. And so you try to go inside yourself and find, what are the small things I can do today, whether it's smiling at the person who's passing me on the road, whether it's picking up garbage when I go along my walk, anything that I can do to make the world a better place. That is going to be felt throughout, across the planet. When I forgive someone, when I forgive myself, those are things that are going to carry on without, it's not just about us. We project that into the world.
Part of leadership, a part of the mindset is, I'm speculating, that there are times that there are uncomfortable moments. You don't just go from traveling in a plane and driving to, I'm just going to use an electrical bike and I'm going to speculate. There was probably some uncomfortableness in the transition and in the growth for people that are listening that says, I get that. And there's maybe some things that I've thought about. I want to make different choices in my life, but there's going to be uncomfortableness for me, or it's going to make other people uncomfortable. What would you say to to those people?
An example would be in my permaculture farm.
Okay.
When I went there and I realized, wow, this is a lot of work. I didn't realize how much work it was, physical labor and so forth. And what I also didn't realize is that it involved a lot of death. My cat was bringing in dead mice every day and putting nicely dead mice under my bed, because we were living in a wilderness area and the mice were eating our vegetables and our grains and so forth. So the cat was doing its job, right? We put up a wonderful net to protect our free-range chickens. And I didn't want it to stand out, so I didn't, do some sort of orange or something. I just did it black so it would sort of blend into the environment. And what I didn't realize is that it meant that owls couldn't see it. So at nighttime, once a year, a wonderful, beautiful owl would dive down to get a mouse, and it would end up hanging itself in the net. And I was so sad, the next day, because this is exactly what I'm not wanting. And I also had these free-range chickens, which we would let out into the actual fields and gardens and so forth. And then we'd gather them back in by, offering some grain and stuff. But of course, you have the chicken hawk and you have the fox. And that's part of we all watch The Lion King, right? So that's part of the natural cycle of life. But it's hard when you lose one of your chickens, when you see them being carried off by the chicken hawk or something. And those kinds of, or simple mistakes. I would grow seedlings, like hundreds of seedlings, on my balcony. And I had an awning that I had to put out by 11 o'clock or to get too hot. And one day I forgot to put the awning out. We went off to do something and came back, and 6 weeks of work was just fried, So you have these shocks, these wake up calls, and you realize how difficult it is and how that can be. You think about the pioneers, my gosh, the people in the old days who had to fight their way through and do all these experiences. Sometimes it can be hard. So those are just, permaculture examples. And I'm sure in everyday life, there's a lot of other things that can go wrong. It's not like everything's just easy. Some days it's pouring rain and I really need to go grocery shopping and I don't want to get on that electrical bike. It's just like, oh my God. But the other side of it is to realize that sometimes those sacrifices are meaningful. When I have any kind of suffering, I'm reminded of a story in my Zen Stories book where the guy, it's called The Salt Water. And basically the guy says, whenever you suffer, remember that you're experiencing something that everyone else has at one point felt. And if you find that connection to other people who are also suffering, whether you go to a group and you connect with people who are having the same problems, you suddenly realize it's not, you're sharing that. It's no longer this tightened up problem.
Thinking about your seedlings, and there's been things that I've done in my life that, like, all right, I'm making these improvements and something comes along, like you said, you forgot to put the awning out, and and there went 6 weeks of work. Now, I know because I'm speaking from experience in past versions, whenever I would be doing something and the first take up came along, I would say, oh, then that's just proof that I don't need to be doing this. I'm really curious, what was your response to the fact that you lost those 6 seedlings? Did you just say, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but no more seedlings? Or did you just readjust how you approached it?
Definitely the second. The thing about it is you have to be willing to let go. If you hold on to, you have to feel that anger. You can feel that frustration. You can feel the fear or whatever it is, the worry. But then you realize you have the ability to let that go. It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And you just say, okay, how can me personally, I'm a person of action. So if I want to let something go, I have to set myself to the next task.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, darn, that was really stupid, And again, like you said, make a correction so you're not banging your head against the wall. You set up a system that reminds you that you have to put the awning out before you go out that door, So I did that, and then also just had to backtrack and learn how creatively you can cover up the problem that you just experienced. And remember that outer happenings aren't you. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like our actions even aren't ourselves. We can make mistakes. We're meant to spill milk. But basically, we can come back and say, oh, what is my intent? What is my authentic value? And how can I go back to the next step to accommodate for this setback, this minor setback? And it can be millions. You could lose millions. You could lose your house. You could lose a relationship. But at some point, you just have to say, okay, who am I? What are my values? And what's the next step? That's that present moment mindfulness that allows you to overcome fear, overcome anger or worry, and just be and really feel alive.
You are a phenomenal example of leadership begins with us, who we are as humans. It's leading our own lives in accordance with our values and how we want to impact our homes, our communities, our world. And we do it through one act and one decision at a time. When we also give ourselves grace, when maybe that choice wasn't the one that we should have taken. But at the end of the day, collectively, we've made choices that are making a positive impact on everything that we do. And that's what I hear. That is who you are as a human. Thank you so much for being here. I hope everybody just learned so much. Go follow her. Keep up with the newsletter. Get your Zen stories. Keep Tanya in your world. I know I'm going to keep her in mind.
And people can write. Yes. People can write to me on Facebook or Instagram too.
Perfect. On Jam Sessions with TinaEliana.com, Tanya will have her own page there where you're going to be able to connect. And I hope you all have learned as much as I have during this session and this episode. And like and subscribe. Share this episode with people that they need a little Zen in their life. Tanya, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure talking to you, Tina. I think you're a gifted podcast host.
Thank you so much.
All the best.
Come on in. Leave the titles at the door.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Jam Sessions with Tina Eliana. Please subscribe to our channel, download this episode, and share it with someone. You can also listen to the Jam Sessions Jukebox at jamsessionswithtinaeliana.com. Take care, and until next time, I'm Tina Eliana.